categorize as the highs and lows of the human experience. We're going to root ourselves into that space again with a song, a line from Psalm 118, that the text should be put in the chat by Ari. This verse, Psalm 118, verse 5, reads, Min hametzar karatiya anani v'merchavya, from a narrow place I cried out, and God answered me from a place of expanse. So right off the bat in this psalm, in this verse, we have both the lows, the metzar, the narrow place, and then in the same breath, we have the merchav, the expanse. These sort of two opposing emotional experiences, all in one breath. So as I'm singing this, if you know it, I hope you'll join. But as I'm singing this, you can feel free to put in the chat moments that you have experienced, emotional highs and emotional lows in the same moment. Or you can reflect on your own if you don't want to share. Whatever helps you reflect. Min ha-mitzar karatia anani v'merchav yamin ha-mitzar karatia anani v'merchav yamin min ha-mitzar karatia v'merchav yamin ha-mitzar karatia anani v'merchav yamin Adonai li lo ira ma yaser li adam Adonai li lo ira oh ma yaser li adam Adonai li lo ira ma yaser li adam Adonai li lo ira oh ma yaser li adam Oh, min ha-mitzar karatia anani v'merchav yamin ha-mitzar karatia anani v'merchav yamin Oh, Adonai li lo ira ma yaser li adam Adonai li lo ira oh ma yaser li adam Oh babo diri-da babo diri-da hambo ya babo
Very nice. Thank you. There were a few notes here that I wanted to share. One is, if you wouldn't mind turning your volume up a little bit.
Sure,
Some people were having challenges hearing you. And Judith shared while you were singing that she was thinking about the highs and lows of this past weekend. I would say the lows to the highs, I guess, of Rabbi Stephen Walker and everything that was happening in Colleyville, Texas. So I wanted to bring that up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. I know that experience certainly was a low that capped off the high of Shabbat, and then the high of feeling relief and the low of feeling despair. I think that that's a really tragically strong example of exactly what the psalm is holding. Is this volume better? Yeah? Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for singing that with me at home and for listening. So tonight we're going to be taking this general concept of music as the container for the highs and lows of life, and zooming in on two really specific narratives in Tanakh, two narratives in Torah that show these extremes quite starkly in very different but very compatible ways. So you'll find the source sheet, I believe, should be in the chat somewhere, or everyone has access to it somehow. And I see the question in the chat, is this your composition? Yes, that melody was mine. You can find it on my album, which I know the link will be shared with you shortly. So we're going to spend some time tonight diving into these two narratives in Tanakh, learning a few melodies. And I know that throughout the way, you'll have the opportunity to ask some questions about the texts, about the music, or about my music and my process. And I know that Ari will facilitate a nice discussion. So feel free to ask anything that strikes your fancy. We're going to dive right in. So go ahead and open your source sheet. I will as well. Great. So we have in front of us our first narrative. These are two verses from the book of Shemot, from the book of Exodus. And just to situate us in where we are at the beginning of this narrative, we are at the moment where the Israelites and Moshe and Miriam, Moses and Miriam, are standing at the edge of the Red Sea, running away from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, from Paro, from Pharaoh, and running towards redemption in the land of Israel. And before we dive into this text, I would like everyone to take a moment. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or you don't have to, and just call into your mind's eye a moment where you experienced great joy and music somehow punctuated that experience. It doesn't have to be a Jewish experience or a Jewish song, but a moment in your life where you experienced great joy and music somehow played a role or punctuated that moment. So just take a moment and think. I'm just going to sing a nigun and hold that moment. And if you feel comfortable, please do share it in the chat so we can see what we're dealing with. A moment where music punctuated an experience of joy. Ya ba 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 ba, iriram bay, iriram bay, iriram bam, ay ya ba, iriram ya ba bo, iriram bam, ay ya ba, iriram. Ay ba ya babo iriram oh iriram oh irirai oh ya babo iriram ay Hiriram vai ya lai hiriram hiriram ho hiriram ho. Beautiful. So I'm seeing in the chat a lot of amazing moments. I see a lot about weddings, concerts, dancing, davening, ritual, a lot of wedding examples, spiritual connection, brisses, baby namings, so beautiful. So all of these experiences that I'm seeing in the chat are really not only moments of joy where there was music present, but moments of joy where the music was actually really the container for the joy, right? The songs at the concerts, the melodies in the davening, the music that surrounded the chuppah. So thank you so much for sharing all that. So now let's go back to our source sheet, back to the source sheet. So again, here we are situated at the bank of the Red Sea. We are ready to cross the threshold into freedom. And of course, as we can imagine, there is a tremendous excitement, tremendous sensation of joy. And in that moment of joy, there is song. But what we're going to see in just a moment is that not only was there joy in that song, but all of those other layers of complex feelings that we've been that roller coaster, as Joey would say, that we've been discussing in our text, they're there as well. There's joy and there's sorrow, and there's tremendous power, and there's also still a tinge of powerlessness. So we're going to look at this text, and we're going to explore where we see that in the song, in this narrative. So we're beginning at the top of the source sheet, Shemot, Exodus 15, verses 1 and 2. I'll just read it. Az yashir Moshe, then Moshe and the Israelites sang this song to God. They said, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. Oziv zimrat yava yehili lishua. God is my strength and might. God has become my deliverance. This is my God, and I will enshrine him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. And then just a few verses later, we see Miriam, Moshe's sister, joins in this leadership through song. Vatikach Miriam haneviyah achot Aharon et hatof beyada. Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her in dancing with the timbrels. And Miriam chanted for them, sing to God, for God has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver, God has hurled into the sea. Beautiful. So these two moments where the leaders of this, this redemptive journey, Moshe and Miriam, are leading through song, and B'nai Israel, the Israelites, respond in song, and of course, joy is at the center. But like I said, there are other things happening here as well. So I would like us to take a moment, and I think if folks want to raise their hand and participate, we can unmute you if you'd like. There's a few discussion questions underneath these texts that I'd love for us to dive into just a little bit. So take a look, and we can address any of these questions. So the first question, what is the role of singing in this scene? What is song actually doing in this moment in our narrative? Where do we see power, and where do we see powerlessness? And does music play a role in those expressions? And the last question, are there any other moments in the Jewish story or in the broader human story that come to mind when considering these dynamics as expressed in the above text? So let's really open it up for discussion. You can put your hand in the hand raise feature, and Ari will call on you and unmute you, and let's get a discussion going.
Okay, I'm going to call Rosa Berman. I'm going to have you unmute there.
Thank you. So I was attending Rabbi's Shabbat services at Sinai Temple, and Rabbi Wolpe mentioned that song is an expression of emotion. You can get to the soul much better through song than through a prose, through a sermon, for example. It's a connection to God. The word for neshama and ruach, God puts the breath of life into people, and when you sing, you take a deep breath, and then when you sing, the breath comes out. in a melody. So that is a direct connection with God. It uplifts the spirit.
It's really beautiful, Rosa. Thank you so much. Yeah, more reflections.
Terry Kravitz, I'll unmute you for a second.
So the first thing that popped into my mind, and I think probably because we just had Martin Luther King Day, was the singing that was associated with many of the marches. I was thinking about the marches that Martin Luther King himself led, as well as others that that were singing for, coming from a place of, at that point, powerlessness and power at the same time. That's what occurred to me.
That's a really, really apt connection, right? That in that moment of strength and gathering in numbers and resilience, there's so much power. And yet that resilience, that powerful resilience, is actually sourced from deep experiences of powerlessness. And that's complicated, right? What does it mean to have power come from a source of powerlessness that we see in marginalized communities, that we see today in marginalized communities, and that certainly in this text, B'nai Israel was coming from a place of being marginalized as slaves in Israel, and yet that power in their song comes from that experience. Thank you for that reflection.
Okay, Ann Spector.
Thank you, Ari. It's a vehicle of expressing gratitude. The song becomes a way just to specify what they're singing about. They're singing gratitude to the Holy One.
Thank you. You know, singing is kind of cool because you do it together. And in fact, it's one of the rare things, if you have the right group, the singing is, it's nice to hear someone sing, you know, by themselves, but a group together singing and harmonizing like you guys do when you're an ensemble takes it to a different level. And so there's a lot of power in that and a lot of sharing that happens there that doesn't happen in other modes of communication.
Thank you for that. That's so beautiful. And that actually, Ari, reminds me of a really special text from that I first learned actually from the book, The Torah of Music, Joey Weisenberg's anthology of texts, that teaches that singing together is similar to two chavruta, a pair of study partners learning together, that one person learning with another person strengthens the learning itself. And that singing together is like snuggling with your small child before they fall asleep, that human connection strengthens the sleep and the dreams. And that singing together is two voices coming together and uniting soul to soul and creating a new unified, strong voice. And that's the power of communal song. And Ari, I think you're right. I think we really see that in this narrative as well. And it says that Ozi v'zimratia, my strength. That's actually the song that's being sung here in the book of Shemot. Other reflections.
Okay, David Phillips. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Here's my lovely wife, Susan.
So what I was going to say is that I think that frequently when you're joyous, that the music kind of bubbles out of you and it permeates everybody and everything. They feel it in a very visceral way often. And so music does that in a way that speech doesn't always do.
Beautiful. And I can imagine that perhaps that's why in this moment of crossing the sea, song was the communicative vehicle of choice. It doesn't say that they shouted. It doesn't say that they, debated, right? It says that they sang. And that's really, that feels very relevant for this moment. Any other comments before we move on?
Yeah, we have Tali and Kat. So let me unmute. Go ahead, Tali.
I think was just mentioned that music is a unifier, that it goes beyond race, religion, and creed, and it's like once it's the language, it's almost the in every country all over the world. It's how it's music that really unites us. And the other thing that I was just thinking about what's happened this weekend, and in relation to not only when Obama, when the members of the church were killed, he couldn't speak, but what he sang was amazing. He sang Amazing Grace. It's the times when you can't even speak, somehow music comes through and is able to unite all souls in their pain and their joy, etc.
Beautiful. When words fail us, song can lift us up. Absolutely. And Anita, looks like one more comment.
Go ahead, Anita.
Nancy Kaplan in the chat mentioned "We Shall Overcome," and it brought me back to the early 60s, 1961 or so, when I was a freshman at University of Minnesota, and Pete Seeger was singing in the student union in the auditorium there. And towards the end of his concert, he started singing "We Shall Overcome," and we all stood up as a group with our hands on each other's shoulders, singing "We Shall Overcome." And it just had such power, and I mean, tears just streaming down our eyes. And we just had, this 60s and that whole sense that we had of wanting to make the world better.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful image and a beautiful story. Oh, great. I've been unmuted. Thank you. That's such a beautiful image and a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to just note that you noted that in that moment of power and joy and connection, there were tears, right? And of course, even our bodies react to song and joy in nuanced and complicated ways, right? We cry tears of joy sometimes, but I don't know about you, but when I cry tears of joy, it's not pure joy that's driving the tears. There's always elements of sorrow and brokenness that weave their way into every joyous connective moment, and that really fuels the tears. And that's what makes me feel so human and alive. And I see that so richly in our texts, in this particular narrative, in the Psalms that we've been studying so far the past few weeks, and in that beautiful story you just shared, Anita. So thank you. So one more comment from David, I see, and then we're going to continue on the learning journey.
Before we get to David, people asked a question last week when they were watching videos of you guys singing in the ensemble, and then tonight, and they said you sing with your hands. And so I guess the first question, are you conscious of that when you sing? And in particular, they say in the ensemble, there are a lot of you holding your hands up in a way they don't necessarily see in a Jewish setting, like in a synagogue. And is that something that you think about, and how does that tie into your singing practice and what we've been talking about in general?
Great. Thank you for asking that. I'm very aware of my hands for me. So I'll share a little bit about what that means for me. So for me, singing is, it's an embodied experience. I feel our voices are instruments that exist inside our bodies, unlike this instrument, or my first instrument is the cello. I won't play it for you tonight, but that's my very first instrument. Those are embodied in that we touch them, but they don't exist inside of our bodies. And our voices are so deep inside of our bodies that to let them out is actually quite vulnerable. And part of how I exist in song is I find a way to meet that internal instrument with my physical external instrument, and I connect that so intensely to my hands. I shape music as I sing with my hands. I relate to my surroundings with music with my hands, and I relate to God with my hands when I sing. And it's sort of all part of how I sing. And also when I talk, I use my hands a lot when I talk, but that I know that many of us of the Jewish persuasion do that. But certainly I think that that's the more we as a group sing together, the more we start to embody one another's physical expressions as well. That's part of gelling as a group of musicians.
Great. Okay, David, you wanted to share something?
Yes, thank you. That's a perfect segue to what I was going to say, which is Miriam came out and not only sang but danced. So that and so with your hands and music and together with people, when we're moving and we're singing, something breaks through. Something in our ruach breaks through and connects us and heals us and touches us, and it's a beautiful aspect. And it's right there, not only the singing but the dancing as well. I just wanted to lift that up.
Beautiful. And we really see that in this narrative as well, going back to our texts, particularly the story of Miriam. She took a timbrel in her hand and they all went after her and danced with the timbrels, right? The dance and the song in that moment is so intimately connected, and it creates this image of like literally dancing through the sea. So they're running towards redemption. The song is punctuating the redemption. The dance is how they're moving themselves towards that next phase of existence as B'nai Israel. And then every experience that came with them to that moment of being in Mitzrayim, of being in the Meitzar, being in the narrow place, comes with them through the song and through the dance. So thank you. And before we move on to our next narrative moment, we'll sort of cap off this vignette with a melody that I like to use for this line in Exodus 2. Oziva zimratya vayhili lishua. The Lord is my strength and might. The Lord has become my deliverance. There are a lot of beautiful melodies for this, but I like to sing it to a nigun I composed called the Sunrise Nigun, which you can also find on my album. A melody that was composed literally at the break of dawn. And I love to sing it in moments where we're singing narrative sunrises, right? This is its own sort of sunrise. There's still that darkness. There's still that choshech in this moment where they're at the edge of the sea. They haven't made it to Yisrael yet. And yet they see that shachar, they see that sunrise on the horizon of redemption. And they're singing into that liminal moment. A sunrise is a liminal moment. So I'm just going to sing this verse on this nigun. And if you pick it up, you can join in from home. I can't hear you, but of course I can feel when you're singing. Hozi vezimratya vayehi lilishua. Hozi vezimratya vayehi lishua.
So last week, we asked Joey about his musical influences, where he gets his music from, and you've come up with one album. You're working on your second album. So what are your influences? What's your musical background?
Ooh, that is a great question. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure every musician says this, but it's really very eclectic. My own journey took me from my roots in primarily classical music. As I said, I grew up playing cello. My mother is a professional virtuoso violinist, and classical music was really a really significant part of the rhythm of my life, whether it was my own practice or the sounds of waking up on Sunday morning to my mother teaching violin lessons in the living room, to the music, the operas and string quartets we listened to in the car on the way to school, to the chamber music parties that my parents hosted. This was very much the sounds of my life. And then over time, I got very involved in my shul, in my synagogue, really through leading davening, leading prayer. So that became sort of my access point into Jewish life, was through the song and through the prayer, and the sounds of Jewish music and communal singing sort of joined the sounds of classical music and, teenage Deborah's musical awareness, with some Beatles and Rolling Stones from my father. That was also quite significant. And eventually I found my way to music conservatory. By then I had discovered my love for singing, and I was a classical voice major. And that led me towards a desire to really learn about how music shows up in communities that are vastly different from the ones I grew up in. So I did a dual degree in religious anthropology and did a lot of travel and a lot of field work learning about music and faith communities around the world and the role that music plays. And so Ghanaian church music and traditional classical Indian singing and Quranic chant in Egypt, this music all started to sort of make its way into my brain again. And all of this kind of mixed up together to influence a lot of how I started to think about the music that was coming from me, from my own heart and soul. So when I started to compose Jewish music, these were all my influences sort of swirling inside of me. And then I started to add new influences, and those influences were the musicians I was playing with and learning from. Joey Weisenberg is certainly a significant teacher and musical influence in my life. And many of the other musicians in the Jewish music world who I consider my colleagues and teachers continue to be a huge influence on the music I compose and how I think as a musician and how I orient myself.
Right. I did notice that I told people before that I first found you on B'nai Jeshurun site because you are one of the prayer leaders and you rotate in. I still don't know how the rotation works, but if people watch enough Shabbatot or they can watch recordings, they'll find you. But in that area, you're singing the melodies of B'nai Jeshurun, which is not necessarily Ashkenazi melodies, and you've kind of worked with their side, which I would say more Sephardi Mizrahi music. So that must also play in a little bit, I would assume, to your musical evolution.
Certainly, yeah. I'll say that at B'nai Jeshurun, one of the goals of the music that gets put into the davening, into the services, is that they really represent the range of Jewish life out there, right? The music should represent the people in our community, and the Jewish people in America and around the world come from all backgrounds and walks of life, and we should hear those sounds and we should sing those sounds in our songs and in our prayers. And that's been just a tremendously rich experience learning that music. Great. So I think this is it's so lovely to discuss this with you. So we're gonna say goodbye briefly to the story of the crossing of the Red Sea. Although we are never fully done with that story. There are endless midrashim to explore, and maybe we'll learn more about that one day. And we're going to turn our eyes towards another, what I would call extreme moment of song in the narrative of the Jewish people. So take a look at your source sheet. If the crossing of the Red Sea was sort of one of the ultimate highs of the Jewish narrative experience, I would say that Psalm 137 represents one of the ultimate lows in the textual Tanakh Jewish narrative experience. This psalm tells the story of exile in Babylon, this real low in the story of the Jewish people, where we were exiled from our land. We were unable to live in Jerusalem, unable to live in our home. And here in this psalm, that the wailing and really dark depth of sadness of that experience is expressed. And it's expressed with many, many, many mentions of song and melody and music. But song and melody and music represent many different things in this psalm. It's actually kind of amazing. So I've only pulled out 6 verses total from the psalm. I'm going to read them. And as I'm reading this out loud, just, you could take notes for yourself, or you could just count how many different mentions of song or music or melody do you see? And what are the different experiences that these references to song and melody represent? So try to note that. You can throw it in the chat if you notice, but what are the different experiences or feelings or concepts that song and melody is representing just in these 6 verses? So I'm going to go ahead and read. Al Naharot Bavel, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept as we thought of Zion. There on the poplars we hung out our lyres. For our captors asked us there for songs, our tormentors for amusement. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing a song of the Lord on alien soil? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, let my tongue stick to my palate if I cease to think of you, if I do not keep Jerusalem in memory, even at my happiest hour. So in this very sad moment, and there are, I'll just say that there are, many, many, many different melodies across faith traditions for this psalm, and we'll get into that a little bit tonight and some more next week. What are the different feelings, emotions, and concepts that music, song, or instruments are representing here? What did folks see? Did anyone catch them? Okay, so Susan is saying that music is the thing that is sort of being given up on when we give up on our experience. Music is one of the things we give up. Anita is noting that song is something that sort of can be used to torment or mock. Song also represents nostalgia, sadness, loyalty. Not being able to sing represents, as Rosa says, the brokenheartedness at the loss. Then Deb is noting that song also represents the actual thing that we miss, Israel and Zion. Song representing memory, says Ellen. Song representing powerlessness, Lynn says. Great. Song as the release to sorrow, says Kate. Excellent. So we see here, these are all great. I'm going to walk us through it very briefly so we really see it in the text. All right. So we're sitting at the rivers of Babylon, and we're sad, we're weeping, and we're remembering what we've lost. And we're so sad that there we hung up our lyres. So here we are, 2 verses in. We're sad, we're weeping, we're crying. We're so sad that we're saying, that's it. No more music, no more instruments. We are too sad. For our captors asked us there for songs, for amusement. Sing for us the songs of Zion. The people that were there to oppress us, humiliate us, they were the ones that said, song is the thing that will make you feel humiliated and us feel powerful. Song represents your downfall and our power over you. And then we say, out of our sadness, we say, verse 4, how can we sing a song of the Lord on alien soil? So here, song represents our own connection to the land, our own knowledge of the land, our own autonomy over our experience. How can we sing that? How can we be in song if we can't even be autonomous over our experience, if we have no power at all? And then verse 5, if I forget you, Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, let my tongue stick to my palate. If I cease to think of you, if I don't keep Jerusalem even in my memory. So this commitment to never, ever, ever forget. So music is something we can't do if we're too sad. Music is something that is used to humiliate us and torture us. Music is so precious, so special, that if we are away from where we need to be, we can't even engage in it. And yet, song is the thing that will connect us to our memories. And all of these verses are in of itself a song that has been used probably more often than almost any other psalm of the 150 psalms across faith traditions. This is sung in languages and in musical styles all over the world. This song about how song is just too painful when we are in exile. So a lot happening there. And here we have the exact same reflection questions. We're going to take a moment for discussion, just like the first text. We kind of already answered this. What is the role of singing in the scene? Well, it plays a lot of roles, as we just saw. And where do we see power and powerlessness, and what is music's role in that expression? And are there other moments in the Jewish story or in the broader human story that come to mind when we consider the dynamics of music in this psalm? So if you have anything you want to say about this, please go ahead and put your hand in the chat. Yes, I see Ellen Meyerowitz.
Okay, I'll find them. Okay, Howard, you unmute. I am trying. Howard, try one more time. I'm asking you to unmute, and if not, we'll go to Kate. Okay, maybe he's having some technical difficulties. Kate, can you unmute?
Yeah. Yes, this makes me think of the pictures I've seen in the concentration camps of the Jewish classical orchestras, the small chamber orchestras playing as their own people are in line. The suffering with the classical music at the same time. And you mentioned that, Deborah, about the humiliation that music can cause. And that's what I thought of was photographs I've seen of these tragic, similar emotional ironies.
Yes, Kate, thank you so much. And one of the most famous examples of that exact example you gave is the story of the Theresian ghetto. Very famously, the prisoners there were really forced by the Nazis to put on a production of Verdi's Requiem to be performed for the Red Cross when they came to visit. And anyone here is maybe you're familiar with the Verdi Requiem. It has some of the most overwhelmingly intense musical moments, really, of anything I've ever heard. And one of the most famous movements, Dies Irae, Day of Wrath, singing about the ultimate day of wrath that will come to those who find themselves enveloped in wrath of God. And the prisoners sang that. They were forced to sing that by the Nazis, and they took that as an opportunity to sing to the Nazis' faces, Day of Wrath. Day of Wrath is coming. Incredibly complicated and powerful experience. All right, who else?
We'll try Martin.
There it goes. Alrighty. I actually created an entire opera that fuses nature sounds, animal sounds, and bug sounds with human music.
Wow, that's
Okay.
incredible. I mean, that's just such an amazing integration of all the different expressions of what it means to be alive and in music. Thank you so much. All right.
Okay. I don't know if we have Donna. Hold on. Go ahead, Donna.
Hi, this is Donna. I just will tell you, we've been doing some studying with the Sephardim and the First and Second Inquisition and the Psalms, and singing the Psalms were the most important things they would sing before they were taken to the gallows and died. So it's also a reflection for other people in our nation and in our people, in our history, that the Psalms created this sense of hope, because that's what they say, the parts that's talked about hope and about being with God when the day came for them to leave the earth. So it was a sense of hope and reflection to God.
Okay.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you.
And I think we do have Judith. Let's see if we can get Judith.
Here I am. There's one word in that passage that speaks to hope, and it's im ishkachech. It's if I forget you. So the whole thing is very bittersweet and sad, but in there's that inner strength that says, only if I will forget will I lose my right hand if I forget Jerusalem. So I feel that word if, imeshkach, is very important in that, because it changes the tenor of the sadness of that passage.
Beautiful. That's so interesting, right? It implies that, a commitment to not forgetting, right? Which is hope, like commitments. If we're still able to make commitments, to remember, right? If I should forget implies I won't, I will remember. And in remembrance, there is hope. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Excellent. Any other comments on this?
I've tried to unmute the Merowitzes, but we can't. So they chatted something to everybody about the music and experience of music in bad times, but also in good times and in hope. And that we can take the negative experiences, put it into music, and then it turns into something that is more than just negative. It creates hope for a change, hope for the future.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's beautiful, and such a lovely way to end the discussion on these texts, right? This first text that we looked at, this first narrative of the crossing of the sea, which at first glance looks like pure joy, but when we dig deeper, we see that there's layers of sorrow, of powerlessness, of marginalization, and of course, the narrative we just looked at, the sitting at the waters of Babylon, where it seems pretty bleak at first look, and yet, as so many have noted, there's glimmers of hope of that sunrise, even within this incredibly sad psalm. So thank you. So I think we have just a few more minutes, and I think before I close up with one last song, I did want to open up if there are any final questions from Ari or from anyone else.
I've seen people ask, how did you find Joey in the ensemble, and how long have you been singing with him? Like, what brought you to him, and how long have you been singing with the group?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just about 10 years now, I've been with the group and working with Joey. I actually first met Joey at shul, at services. He was the music director of a synagogue in Brooklyn, the same synagogue that we've recorded some of our albums, and some of the videos you've seen have been in that choir loft. And I would go there sometimes, lead davening, lead prayers there sometimes. And it was at that point that he was putting together what we now know as the Hadar Ensemble. So that's how we connected, and been working together for about a decade now, which is really a gift. Yeah.
And then people ask, who will you be singing with on February 12th? Who will be in LA with you?
Ooh, what a crew. I hope you come. First of all, the concert is outside. So if you are comfortable doing outdoor gatherings at this stage, then you are welcome to come in person. It will be entirely outside, and also streamed. So really any way you feel good, you are welcome. There will be 7 musical artists there. So we have myself, very grateful to be there, Rabbi Josh Warshawski, Rabbi Yosef Goldman, Rabbi Ariel Root Wolpe, Rabbi Micah Shapiro, Ilana Arian, and Chava Morel, and myself. And I'm really lucky that I've collaborated with all of them. I've recorded with all of them. Most of them were singing on my album. I've sung on all of their albums, and we're a really connected group of friends and collaborative colleagues, and it should be really lovely. So I hope you'll join us.
Great. Howard and Ellen, you are finally on. Did you have a question before we wrap up with the final song? No. Okay.
Great. So we'll finish up with a song, and I just want to say thank you for being with me tonight. I do hope you'll join me next week, but if I don't see you for some reason, it's been such a joy to learn with you, and a real honor to be here at this this month-long scholar series. Just incredible that there have been so many teachers teaching so many amazing things together for this community that just clearly values learning in such a true and deep way. So thank you. I'm going to finish with a little bit of a sneak peek of what we'll be doing next week. So next week we'll be thinking a little bit about the creative process of putting texts and music together, which I know we've explored in various ways over the past few weeks. And we'll be kind of synthesizing some of the different texts and concepts we studied together to look at the way music is created, and also maybe even create something together as a group, perhaps. So I'm going to share a brand new song of mine that was inspired in part by several midrashim, several creative commentaries on the crossing of the sea narrative. And next week we'll get more into how that process really unfolds. So this is called Miriam Haneviah. It's inspired by a midrash from the Talmud, and also from a poem written by Rabbi Leila Galberner that elevates the role of Miriam as prophetess through song. So thank you so much. Have a good night, and I'll finish us up with this song. Miriam Haneviah Oz וזמרה בידה. מרים הנביאה עוז וזמרה בידה. במהרה בימינו היא תביאנו אל מי הישועה. להגדיל זמרת עולם. מרים תרקוד איתנו לתקן את העולם. במהרה בימינו היא תביאנו אל מי הישועה. במהרה בימינו היא תביאנו אל מי הישועה. Irirambaya, irirambaya babo, irirambaya, irirambaya babo, irirambaya.
Thank you.
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Looking forward to having Deborah back next week with us. Lots more programs. Go to occsp.net for what's coming up in the rest of January and February. I'm working on March and April. So we're keeping busy online. Keep safe, everybody. Have a great evening. And I'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.